good friend of mine. We've been talking to her for many years. I want to come, I want to come, I want to come. So finally, we said, hey, let's work it out this year. And due to a family issue, he was not able to come. But he said, I will try. I said, look, help me out here. Because it really couldn't be avoided. Well, he just went beyond the call of duty and got us the top of the top.
Yes.
And we are so thankful that Elder Lincoln Steed is here from the General Conference, who every month puts together a magazine that gets circulated over 200,000 issues that go out about religious liberty and the importance of protecting that. And we all know that anyway, time is, as it comes to the close, things like that are going to diminish, but I'm so grateful that we have a gentleman, a team devoted to that, because that's what we got to be about as well. Thank you for taking time to be with us. We know you kind of have some important meetings coming up here in a couple of weeks, but we are very grateful that you are here, and I have asked Elder Steve this morning to have our devotional. Welcome to Arizona.
Amen.
Great to be here, and I planned on promoting liberty a little bit, but it's done. Thank you. That helps me fit within the time. I thought of what to share with you, and these are interesting times. A few days ago, I recorded a message that we've sent out to every church on a DVD, and it's entitled A Time of Fire. And I hadn't yet been to Phoenix. You think of fire when it's happened, 14 or so. But these are times of fire, and what was on my mind was that only a few weeks ago, when I went to San Antonio for some business, not unconnected with the upcoming meetings, I drove up to Waco for the second time. I visited Mount Carmel. Now, we all know very well, more than the general public, that the Davidians have only a social connection to Seventh-day Adventists. Of the 80 or so people that died in that siege and attack in 1993, almost all of them, in fact all of them, were either ex-Adventists or the children of Adventists. But doctrinally, they're on another wavelength, we think. But you have to remember, in a secular society or a nominally religious society, when you step back a little, there's not a hair's breadth difference to the average person between Davidians, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, so on. And what happened to them has resonated with me ever since 1993. I went there a few weeks after the event and spoke to one of the surviving Davidians, and it was pitiful to see the burned out, well, it wasn't even a shell, just the basement with the debris still around, and to see the crushed escape tunnels and so on, and to know what had happened. But when I went back the other day, it was even more poignant, because about 5 or so families have rebuilt homes there. They live in a way that I'm not comfortable with. It's sort of a commune style thing. They have a prophet, prophet and his wife. I wanted to find out specifically, do they still adhere to this prophecy in Ezekiel that they had applied to Adventists, where at the end of time they were to go through and kill the leadership of the church? And they've gone soft on that, thankfully. But as I talked to them and reviewed the surroundings there and looked at the memorial they have a memorial, a little stone for each person that died, their age and where they were from. And then they have the, I forget how they designate them, but the leading angels, the angels of Adventism. They start with Ellen White. They have A.T. Jones, which I felt gratified with, the pioneer of religious liberty, right up through Hutef, their founder, and Koresh, and so on. But when I looked at that and remembered the fire, and I looked at the war on terrorism that we're fighting, I thought, yes, we weren't as defensive of their rights when it happened as we should have been. But we're in an era when that sort of thing could happen to any group that are marginalized. And how easily we're marginalized. I was looking at Luke chapter 6, and Jesus there speaking to the multitude gathered around, he says, "Blessed are you when men shall hate you, and when they shall separate you from their company, and shall reproach you, and cast out your name as evil, for the Son of Man's sake." We like to think of Seventh-day Adventists that we're well liked by everyone. And part of our Religious Liberty Department is the public affairs responsibility. We are doing PR work in essence, especially in the nation's capital. And I wouldn't like to say that we hate it. Our main problem is we're not known. And we can do a lot about that. Not so much promoting ourselves, but in promoting the name of Jesus and His soon coming and all of the excitement associated with the prophetic waymarks that tell us that that's soon. You know, that will give us the right name in front of people rather than promoting ourselves. But that said, I think we're fast coming to a time when great controversy, for example, will not fall on receptive ears generally. In an age of terrorism or fear of terrorism, it's all too easy to characterize someone who thinks a little bit differently as troublesome. The parallel that I drew on the video was occasioned not just by Waco, but seeing what had happened when the full weight of the federal government descended on them, but thinking that we're coming to a crisis point very quickly. You know, in September of this year, the Pope of Rome is to address, for the first time ever by a religious leader, he's going to address a joint session of Congress. Now, the Dalai Lama, who, you know, we don't believe what he believes, and he's a loved, non-threatening figure, he was asked to do that, and there was such a storm of criticism that was withdrawn, the invitation. But the Pope of Rome is to address Congress. Now, we don't know what he'll say, but I'll put a lot of my credibility, in fact, all of my credibility, against the strong likelihood that he will share with the nation his burden for a family rest day. That's what he's been promoting in Europe of late. It has a certain logic to it. And the day before he appears before Congress, he will be speaking at the World Institute of the Family in Philadelphia. Very unlikely he will not continue and broach the topic of this secular rest day, wherein people are encouraged to cease from labour and to attend church and spiritually rejuvenate themselves. What are you going to say when that happens? Are you going to dare speak against the Holy Father, this moral leader of mankind? At the moment, the newspapers and the news media and the political leaders are all on Twitter because he's come out with the view that global warming is caused by human activity. You know, scientists and many politicians have been pushing this for some time, but it takes the Holy Father to speak on it to make it a major issue. That should tell Adventists where we are. I want to tell you just quickly a quick example of what I saw about two ways, not the only two, thankfully, that we can respond to a crisis. A few years ago with Dr. John Gratz from the General Conference Religious Liberty Department, I toured a number of countries in Southeast Asia. We went to Laos. I put it on the agenda because I came to the US during the Vietnam era, and I still remember my number, 243. Never came up, thankfully. But I watched the war very closely, and I remember our secret war on Laos. We dropped more bombs there than on Germany in World War II, a little country of only 5 million people. And it's ruled by the communists today. The Pathet Lao guerrilla won. So John and I went back then. Interesting experience. It was a sort of a Stalinist regime. We spoke to many government leaders. The US ambassador that we met there said, you know, we're still the enemy. And on Sabbath we attended the Adventist church, and it was wonderfully heartwarming. They seemed like any other church company, saying the same hymns. For our sake, they had a lot of the service in English. We had a potluck afterwards. It was fine. We started to ask them questions, and we found that nobody had run-ins with the Lord. Even though in that country, if you hand out Christian literature, especially outside the capital city of Vientiane, you will go to prison for up to 24 years. At the time we visited, there were 60 Christians in jail. And the government minister of religion said, oh, we believe in religion, but we will not endure naughty behaviour, he said. Christian literature, naughty behaviour. No Adventists were in jail. And with questioning, we found out a funny reality. Within the walls of that church, they were worshipping, praising God. They stepped outside the church and they were silent as the tomb. In their community, they would have Buddhist weddings, Buddhist funerals, even though they might have a Christian service. They were invisible in the community, and consequently, no persecution in that country, no harassment. I can tell you wonderful stories of the early days of the communist takeover. Many Adventists stood faithfully. But at the moment we visited, they had arrived at this compact that they would not test the limits of the restriction they were living under. On that same visit, we went to Ambon, Indonesia. That was a particular hazard to us because we learned from a hearing in Washington about the civil war that had broken out between Muslims and Christians in that province of Indonesia. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world, 95% Muslims. But in the province of Ambon, it was 50% Christians, 50% Muslims. And Al-Qaeda, we'd heard by testimony from experts, had decided to make a test case of this area. And they'd fomented, this is before 9/11, just a little bit before 9/11, they'd fomented violence. And when it broke out, as they told us when we asked people, the Christians en masse were on one side, Muslims on the other. The Muslims were yelling out, Allah Akbar, God is great. Christians were yelling out and singing, everybody ought to know who Jesus is. And they went at it. A few tens of thousands of people died as a result. When we arrived, it was devastation. At least 25–30% of everything destroyed. We met with the Adventists. And they sang a wonderful song. They're well known for their singing in that city of 200,000 people, Ambon itself. We found that, yes, they'd had 2 churches destroyed. They'd had to put up with harassment from the Muslims. We saw the bullet holes in the church walls. The lectern itself was shattered from bullets. But on further questioning, I found out that they had become part of the violence. They told me in the balcony of the church, they used to stand there and shoot at the Muslim headquarters up the hill. They told me that many people had died out in front of the church. I asked the elder, I said, do you think they'll attack again? Oh yes, he said, they will come, but I'm ready, I have my gun. I have my gun. And we saw there that it's not universal, but to a large degree, our members as well as some other Christians have responded in kind and become part of the problem. It was a very interesting conversation we had. One of the last days that we were there, we visited the mayor in his home. It was one of the Muslim holy days, and he was very kind to welcome us in his own home underneath a picture of the mosque in Mecca. And he was pleasant, we didn't feel threatened, but he said, this is a wonderful meeting. He says, you're the first Christians and the first outsiders to come since the violence. And he said, if you'd come during that violence, you would have been killed on the spot. So that was rather sobering. And after we met with him, we moved on and met with the Minister of Religion for that whole province, Dr. Sabesi. And we had a long, pleasant visit with him. He quoted the Bible a lot, even though he was a Muslim doctor of religion, a doctor of medicine. After we'd relaxed a bit and gone through all the formalities, he leaned in and he asked us a question. He said, we have a huge problem here. He said, it's the biggest problem yet. And remember, this is a community where 20,000 people had died directly in violence. A quarter or a third of the buildings, including the government buildings, the state university being destroyed. People had fled by the thousands. Even to cross the bay, they were running the gauntlet because fast gunboats would intercept people and kill them, and people had stopped eating fish because there was so much human flesh in the water. What's their biggest problem? And he told us the story. We were there in February of the year, and he said, the year before, a Christian preacher had arisen, teaching that the prophecies revealed that Christ was to return in November of that year.
Wow.
And he said tens of thousands of people followed him. They sold their goods, they gave away their property, and they retreated with this pastor to an outlying area to await the return of Christ. And he said he didn't come. He hasn't come. And he says now these people, they want their property back. He said this is the greatest problem facing us. What shall we do? And I knew that it was true. I'd actually read a little bit of this in the paper. Now John, who's a Swiss, tells me, and it's a reasonable model when you're visiting with these people, you don't lecture to them too much. You listen, you're representing a church, but you're not there to force your view on them. But I thought, this can't pass. And I said to him, it seems to me you should be much more interested in rebuilding destroyed property and reinstating people whose lives have been dislocated than solving a problem caused by people's ignorance. And he appreciated that. But I thought long and hard about that. How, obviously, in these two other cases, one in that area and one elsewhere, Adventists had become part of the problem or tried to ignore it totally. But that will not save you, because at the end of the day, as he showed, our views, our prophetic views, very easily, as they did back in Rome with Nero, and as they were there in Ambon, very easily, whatever trouble strikes, someone will point at the other, the religious other, and say, these people caused it. What are you going to do? At the end of this year, perhaps, or in the months to come, when we, in some regard, perhaps some representative of your church, or maybe you, if you're bold enough, murmur that the Pope is wrong in projecting his views on a democratic, once Protestant country. Are you going to dare say that? And are you going to risk the possibility that we will be accused of not just being hateful toward another religious group, but being against the whole good of the society? That's what's at stake. And Jesus had it right. Blessed are you when all men will hate you and will think you're the other because of me, not because of you. You know, I've been through a number of committees of our church on public image, and far too often they focus on selling ourselves. That's doomed to failure. Amen. But we have to sell Christ, but not in a generic, greeting card fashion. We have to sell the Christ who is soon to come, in spite of all these false Christs. Yeah. We have to speak out when the moment is right. Don't keep quiet. I take meetings on religious liberty, and I can create a pretty good case to show you that even by legal precedent and already by public viewpoints, it's become dangerous to stand out and question the standard view. We will find it when people start reading Great Controversy. We will find it when they start listening to what we're saying. And we need to be careful, or to realize ahead of time, that this is our duty. Not our duty to hide. Not our duty to take up, like the Davidians did, a false sort of a militancy. They believed that Christ was coming. They believed that they would be persecuted. And they were persecuted. They were killed. But they were wrong. Because it was a self-induced otherness. But we're coming to the testing point, I believe. Maybe in September. I'm not claiming to be a prophet, but I can read the seasons as well as the Pharisees should have been able to in Jesus' time. We need to decide ahead of time. Are we going to witness for Christ and for the truth that we hold dear and this Advent hope, no matter what happens to us? I think we'll have to, because one thing is certain. There's such a storm coming that even if you keep quiet, you might find that the ostracism and the hatred is just as bad. So why not go into the crisis with your head up and the message clear and proclaim Jesus for this time. Thank you for listening to me, and please support Liberty Magazine, which I wish more Adventists read. There's only 10,000 Adventists read Liberty, but our charter is to send it to these thought leaders in the community, politicians, lawyers, judges, and so on. And please encourage your members in your local churches to support this in a bigger way. We can easily send out 3 or 4 times as many. We're only limited by funds, which are steady. We're not in trouble. But, the loud cry should relate to publishing, even though we're closing publishing houses. We need a loud cry. We need a bold message to end, or a bold phase to end this proclamation that you and I are called members of the remnant to proclaim to this generation. Amen. Thank you.